Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pitts. The Ukraine War News Update, first part there for the 15th of September 2024. It's a long time after I normally release them. It's a Sunday and my boys the rugby season started again. He plays football on a Saturday, rugby on a Sunday. First competitive match of the season. He got man of the match, they lost. He's played in the wrong position, made me really angry. Clearly scrum half, why do you put him on a wing? I mean, he's been training, he is the scrum half. Seething I was angrier this morning than I've been in months and months and months. However, he got man of the match, but still, yeah, not cool. And for you Kiwis out there, yes, I am wearing a 2000 Northlands rugby jersey. Choice, mate. Awesome. Anyway, I digress. I can't digress. I haven't even started. Ukrainian general staff figures for the Russian losses for the day before, all the usual caveats apply. And you can find those caveats in the description to the video below. Here we have 1,170 personnel lost, which is fairly substantial. Anything over 1,000 is always going to hurt. And 6 tanks snip below the daily average, 20 armoured personnel vehicles, or AFV, sorry, armoured fighting vehicles. That includes infantry fighting vehicles, armoured personnel carriers, and mine-resistant ambush protection vehicles. 20, just over the daily average lost, shows that they are still attacking, using quite a lot of equipment, and they are losing quite a bit. I think Kursk is seeing quite a bit of Russian equipment be attrited. 23 pieces of artillery taken out, and that is not the highest number, but it is above the daily average. 1 anti-aircraft warfare system, 53 vehicles and fuel tanks, no pieces of special equipment. So fairly difficult day for the Russians, but not the worst day that I've seen by any stretch. These losses are unsustainable, I keep saying, but yet they're still attacking. But they are changing the way they attack. They are making decisions that wouldn't be made if these losses were sustainable. For example, one thing, and I shared this with you on my Kursk update, that there was a prisoner swap yesterday, and the rumor is that the 103 prisoners that the Ukrainians gave back were from Kursk conscripts, and those troops have been recycled back into to fighting on the front line straight away. So they didn't, there's no rehabilitation. Now you could argue it's actually a reflection of how well the Ukrainians treat their POWs, such that they are not malnourished, they haven't been tortured, so they're not psychologically damaged either, and they don't need rehabilitation. You can just recycle them back onto the front line. But I think it is indicative of where the Russians are at, where they are scrabbling around, trying to get as many people to fight as possible, using specialists from other areas to do frontal assaults, and getting your POWs exchanged straight back on the front line, if indeed that is true, of course. Now, when we look at the Russian losses for the day before, this is Andrew Papetra's latest list. We can see that here we have the combat losses for the Ukrainians and the combat losses for the Russians. That's about 3-to-1 combat loss for the Russians, 3 Russians to every 1 Ukrainian loss. So that is looking good for the Ukrainians. A lot of civilian vehicles also taken out there. So if we look at the Ukrainian losses, we see that there is nothing of incredibly high value there. A range of artillery destroyed and damaged. We've got 2 tanks, 1 damaged, 1 destroyed. So the old T-64 there. Then we look at the APCs and MRAPs, and they are mainly Western provided kit. Humvee destroyed, FV-103 Spartan, UK provided, probably damaged there. And then a lot of destroyed and abandoned MRAPs. I say a lot, 5 of them. Kirpis, Cossacks, and then an undescribed MRAP, and then another Cossack damaged, and then the usual kind of civilian stuff at the bottom, and a couple of purple decoys, trees that have been hit, claimed to be hits on, say, for example, a Lancet pretending to hit an SPG, and a Lancet claiming to hit a vehicle but without proof. In other words, when the Russians put these claims on socials, they don't always match up to reality, and Andrew's sort of picking them apart, saying no, he puts that down as a decoy, like a decoy tree. Lancet's still causing problems though. Here, 2 of the artillery pieces taken out by Lancets, shelling, FPV, drone drop bombs, usual range of equipment. For the Russians, they lose a command and control. They lost the command and control vehicle, destroyed, BMP-1K SH, so that's going to hurt them a little bit. With that you could lose high-ranking officials, intelligence, etc., and of course the capabilities of the vehicle. We have a recovery vehicle, Brem 1 destroyed, 3 artillery systems destroyed, including 2 multiple launch rocket systems, a Grad and an Uragan, and a Grad damaged as well. So actually that's a pretty good day in terms of MLRS, multiple launch rocket systems. A lot of tanks here on the list, about 50% of them abandoned or destroyed. Track guard and sheds, a couple of those. Most of the tanks, though, are unlabeled due to, I presume, fundamental destruction and not knowing what they are. The Ukrainians captured a BTR 82AT. Then we have an awful lot of infantry fighting vehicles, most of them abandoned or destroyed. BMP 2s and 3s. Few BMDs as well. That's in the Kursk area for sure. I think it's the 51st Airborne VDV using that in the Kursk region near a place called Ludimivka. They've lost a number of those. APCs, a few of them lost, and a whole host of trucks destroyed. Loafs, pickup trucks, larders, cars, motorcycles, and trucks, military trucks as well, buggies and ATVs too. So it's just, a big old list of equipment. Russians definitely having a bad couple of days of equipment losses. There's a massive list yesterday, possibly even the day before as well. So the last 2 or 3 days have been very bad for the Russians in numbers of pieces of kit they have lost. Okay. Tim White says, unverified claims from Ukraine's Center for National Resistance and in occupied Luhansk, the number of deserters or refuseniks has increased dramatically. Meanwhile, Ukraine opens 11 criminal cases into reports Russia recruits children into paramilitary organizations in occupied areas. So that's worthy of note. We have Ukrainian airborne troops report defeating a convoy of 14 armoured vehicles of the Russian airborne troops on their way to storm Ukrainian positions in Kursk Oblast. Reportedly, Russia lost 5 airborne combat vehicles, a tank, an APC, and several dozen troops. So that could be from the aforementioned 51st Airborne in the Kursk region near Ludimivka. It could be that is a footage that, because it has been geolocated, so it almost certainly is. There's been some footage I'm not going to show you. You can go and find it out. But the Ukrainians did an attack on the Crimea 2 gas rig back on September the 10th to 11th. Russians claim that they sunk 8 or 10 of their boats, and it was a bit of a disaster. Ukrainians have not admitted that was the case, and they've actually released some quite extensive footage here. The Russians lost the Su-30 SM jet as well. It says Su-34 here, SM, from a manpad. Tendal says Ukrainian main directorate of intelligence released a longer video of the operation against the Russian-occupied gas rig. The operation was undertaken on the 10th and 11th. Shows the gas rig heavily hit, including several explosions. Russia occupied several gas rigs in 2014. Today they are used as listening posts, air defense platforms for electronic warfare, and also to coordinate drone attacks against Crimea. During the operation, Ukrainian forces also shot down a Su-34 MS. So no further details about what took place in that exchange, but it could have been the Ukrainians lost quite a bit, or it could have been they took control of the gas rig. I don't know the outcome really. Right, in images, so this is a video of a whole building becoming a non-building after the Ukrainian Air Force, with a US supplied GBU-39 SDB small diameter bomb, glide bomb, went through the roof of that building and flattened it. There are claims that it was housing, I haven't got it here. I did have that. It was claimed that it was housing some troops there. I forget which types of troops now. Is it paratroopers and someone else? So, could be quite a serious hit on that building, that's for sure. Anyway, sorry about that phone call in the middle. I've lost my thread of thought, but you get the point. Big bomb, aviation still being used by the Ukrainians as well as the Russians. Now, Tim White reports that the Rostov region is somewhere on fire there, borders Ukraine. It's a disaster zone. Local channels openly write there's not enough firefighters or equipment. In the first video, people desperately tried to save their homes without help as flames enter their garden. So it looks like there's some kind of large wildfire in the Rostov region, but it is not an easy situation for the Russians, as they appear not to have enough firefighters. When it comes to wildfires, like I've told you many times before, the conscripts have previously taken up the role of fighting fires. That's part of their kind of remit. So you get a year of being a conscript, and then wildfires hit, you're the ones that are sent out to deal with the wildfires. But since the war started, wildfires have been able to burn more freely because those conscripts are involved with defending the borders and the Ukraine war, etc., etc. So there you go, issues in Rostov there. Now, overnight, there was a much smaller attack, which is good news for the Ukrainians. Only 14 Shahed drones sent, 10 were intercepted. I think, did I read a couple... as you know, I'm not going to say just in case I get it wrong, but here at least no report says 10 out of the 14 were intercepted. Don't know about the other 4. I was going to say a couple of them might have been electronic warfare, but I could be getting confused. 0 out of 2 Iskander-M ballistic missiles were shot down, so not intercepted, and then 1 of the KH-59 or 69 cruise missiles was intercepted. So good news there, but 2 ballistic missiles got through. Now, I don't think this includes the 2 strikes I'm going to talk about. So one is casualties reported in Free Donetsk after Russia struck the Sloviansk thermal power plant this morning. That might have been one. That could have been included in those ballistic missiles. I'm not sure. This morning, could be early in the morning. That is an issue. Power's cut off in Sloviansk, Druzhkivka, and Kramatorsk. Also been shelling of Mykolaiv as well. That is, certainly a concern. The energy infrastructure still being hit by the Russians. And then this, I think, happened today in Kharkiv. A residential building was hit. So far, 28 people have been reported injured, including 3 children. There's some pretty horrible imagery of, old people getting evacuated. And you're just thinking, really? As it just slams into a building in Kharkiv. So that is Russians doing typically Russian things with regard to Kharkiv. And it's again, another example of why the US should be allowing Ukraine to hit much deeper into Russia. This is a really frustrating situation. Okay, this week alone, Russia has used 800 aerial bombs, 300 attack drones, and 30 missiles against Ukraine. That's 1 week. 800 bombs, 300 drones, and that's attack drones like the Shahed drones, and 30 missiles against Ukraine, according to Zelensky. And the imagery of the destruction is just absolutely heartbreaking, and it's this continued barrage by the Russians there. Okay, moving on. Russia says it was attacked last night by 29 drones, although I have very little information on this. According to Moscow, 15 of the drones were shot down over Bryansk Oblast, 5 over Kursk, 4 over Smolensk, 2 over Oryol, and 1 over Belgorod, Kaluga, and Rostov Oblasts. So no information other than perhaps one of them hit here, Nizhny Tagil in Sverdlovsk region of Russia. There was an explosion at a gas pipeline at a metallurgical plant. That looks a fairly considerable bit of damage going on there. There's a lot of fire happening. Already fire down there that seems to have been put out by the looks of it. It's all blackened down there, and now there's fire up here. So I don't think that metallurgical plant is going to be operating too successfully at the moment. I think that is another example of the defense, I'm assuming the defense industry being hit by the Ukrainians. Apologies if there's any noise in the background of family having a raucous time. Luhansk was smoking yesterday, so some major strike in the occupied Luhansk region. Don't know what was hit there, but there's some pretty sizable cook-offs or something happening. So still these strikes taking place during the daytime. And then Gary Kasparov says it's becoming a parody. Why bother condemning what you have the power to stop? Doing that is just a big green light to Putin. At least the ambassador admits that Russia escalates not despite Ukrainian or Western actions, but because of a lack of deterrence. So this is Ambassador Bridget Brink, the US ambassador to Ukraine, saying, we strongly condemn Russia's attack on the commercial cargo ship in the Black Sea last night. So that was a couple of nights ago. This escalatory attack is a blatant violation of international law that threatens global food security. And of course, Russians get away with doing this. If you're just going to say, oh, we're going to condemn you, rather than, I would take an opportunity like that to say, right, you've hit a Black Sea grain export ship. We are now going to allow Ukraine to fire weapons deeper into Russia. So it's setting red lines for Russia, like I've said to you many times before, setting red lines out for Russia, saying you've done that, now you're the ones that have escalated this, by doing stuff like that. So anyway, moving on to other bits and pieces, go and check out my Kursk update this morning, because that actually gives you, or earlier, that gives you a good indication of what's going on there. Lots to mention about that. Just a few other things to add. War Translated Dmitry says, Russian summary on the situation in Kursk Oblast, Glushkovo bridgehead. There is increasing pressure on Russian positions by Ukrainians from two sides, and the Russian Korenovo counteroffensive movement has got bogged down. So this is, if you remember, you've got the Kursk Oblast salient, and then to the side of that, so if you guys are looking, it's going to be out here. So you've got the Kursk Oblast, the Kursk salient there, and then you've got this area underneath the same river with three sides of the rectangle having, you know, the bottom edge is the Ukrainian border, then you've got the Ukrainian border on this edge, and then you've got the Kursk invasion edge on front line on this edge. So the Russians are coming down across the same river and then attacking the Ukrainians here in the salient, in that bridgehead into the Kursk Oblast, and the Ukrainians are coming up from the border and attacking them in the rear here. And here, this Russian source says the enemy is increasing pressure from a new direction in the Kursk region, trying to storm Veseloye. So this is one of those villages that they have taken by coming up from the south underneath the same river, and they've taken, you know, 1, 2, 3 villages. Veseloye is that third village. Ukrainian Armed Forces Command has been throwing armoured groups and infantry into the battle for the fourth day, trying to break through our defences in the area on the border settlements of Medvezhye and Novi Put in the Glushkovki district. So there's actually two areas they're attacking up there. Earlier, they overcame minefields and Dragon's Teeth and are pulling in columns and armoured vehicles and infantry, continuing to try to distract our troops conducting a counter-offensive in the Korenovo district with a threat of a strike in the rear, as mentioned. Now the Ukrainian armed forces are trying to take Veseloye, breaking through it through Novi Put and Obukovka. The attacks, so that's Veseloye is the third village there. The attacks do not stop. Quote, the operational and command situation remains tense. Heavy fighting is underway in the area of the village of Veseloye. The enemy managed to enter the settlement. Units of the armed forces of Ukraine are trying to gain a foothold in the village. Border guards are fighting together with the units of Russian Ministry of Defensive Forces. Armed forces of Ukraine have pulled up reserves and are trying to expand the bridgehead to ensure that access to the workers' settlement of Glushkovko. That's not the big Glushkovko on the river, but it's another Glushkovko slightly over here. Artillery is working on both sides. Aviation is working on our side, and reserves are also moving forward, the FSB Border Service reports. So that's what's happening in the really the same river area. So you've got these 2 points of attack. Russians trying to attack into the Ukrainian bridgehead here, but getting some distractions in the rear, so to speak. I've never had a distraction in the rear. It's always been clear of distractions. The penny dropped for this. Shut up, Piss. Penny dropped for this Russian military blogger about the ZSU actions in Kursk. Too little, too late. By the way, his map is not bad, but it is already outdated. If you follow me, then you know. Okay, so this is the idea that some of the mill bloggers for the Russians are, so a lot of them are complaining, a lot of them saying, you know, this is a bit of an issue, and the Russian counterattack has itself been bogged down and slowed down considerably over the last 48 hours. Russians confirmed, says Dmitry again, the opening of another pocket in the Glushkovko district of Kursk Oblast, much closer to Glushkovko, although the front line is not stable here, as they claim. So admitting that the front line ain't too stable. So multiple axes, they're represented in different ways. Now, military correspondent Saponkov says, again, Dmitry reports on the mass shutdown, and this is very significant, mass shutdown of Starlinks in use by Russians. He says the Starlinks cannot be used for more than 90 days outside the country of registration. Apparently, most are activated in Europe. So what they do is they get hold of these Starlinks, then they falsely, kind of fraudulently register them in Europe, but then if they're consistently used for 3 months outside of Europe, then they kind of automatically shut down, I think. So, quote, since the morning there's been a mass blocking of Starlinks. Dishes registered in the EU are flying off. According to Starlink rules, you cannot use a dish outside the country of registration for more than 90 days. There's also information that dishes with activation in Germany are being massively disconnected. So I wonder whether there's pressure from Europe on, or the EU on Starlink, whether there's pressure from the US. I don't know. This could be like extra extra pressure being put on Starlink, or it could just be Starlink doing what it's supposed to do anyway as part of the Starlink service provision. I don't know. Probably think the former rather than the latter. That's the implication at the end here anyway. Activation in Germany are being massively disconnected. Well, if it's something special is going on in Germany, that's not just because Starlink's German offices are deciding to be officious. So I assume this is at the order of Western governments and military forces. So we'll see. Anyway, that's enough from me. Thank you for watching. Take care, guys, and I'll speak to you soon. Toodle pips.